All right, let's dive into one of the most dynamic, chaotic, and honestly foundational periods in Indian history, the early medieval period. Now, you can forget what you think you know. This is not some quiet, boring interlude between empires. Oh no, this is a centuries-long, subcontinent-wide great game for absolute power.
So, let me ask you this. What happens when a massive empire just collapses? It's a simple question, right? But it's the key to this entire story. For centuries, big empires had created a kind of unity across huge parts of India. But when that unifying power suddenly disappears, it leaves a giant vacuum. And you know what they say about power vacuums. They never stay empty for long.
So what exactly is this early medieval period we're talking about? Well, think of it as the bridge connecting ancient and medieval India. And this is important. It's not a dark age. Far from it. It's this incredible transitional era where the old, giant imperial structures crumble and give way to a patchwork of super ambitious regional kingdoms. Each one has its own unique identity, and every single one of them has its eyes on the ultimate prize, total supremacy.
Okay, so to make sense of this sprawling story, here's our game plan. First, we'll look at the legacy of the last great ancient empire. Then we dive into the main event, the great tripartite struggle. After that, we'll meet the other powerful kings of the North and the Deccan, journey south to a maritime superpower, uncover the era's incredible explosion of culture, and finally, we'll witness the arrival of new powers that would change the game forever.
Right, so our story kicks off in 647 AD with the death of Emperor Harsha. His empire, it was the last great unifying force of ancient North India. And when he died, that unity just shattered. It was like a political free-for-all. Suddenly, dozens of local rulers and ambitious governors saw their chance to carve out a kingdom for themselves. The scramble for power was officially on.
Now, one of the first major players who tried to fill that vacuum was this guy, Lali Taditya of Kashmir. He briefly created a massive kingdom, sure, but his most lasting legacy is actually architectural. He built the Martan Sun Temple, a structure that looks like almost nothing else in India. Its design, with that colonnaded courtyard, it's called a peristylar layout, it has this almost Greco-Roman feel to it. It's just a stunning example of the unique cultural blends that were happening in this era.
But you know, while powers like Lalitaditya's rose and fell, the central conflict of this age was really starting to coalesce around three superpowers. This wasn't just a war, it was the main event. A brutal, century-long, three-way brawl that would define North Indian politics for generations. So, welcome to the Great Tripartite Struggle.
So who were our three main contenders? Well, coming from the east, in modern-day Bengal and Bihar, we have the Palas. They were huge patrons of Buddhism. Then, from the west, in Rajasthan and Gujarat, rise the Gujra Pratiharas, who were basically the wall holding back Arab invasions from the northwest. And finally, storming up from the Deccan Plateau in the south, the mighty Rashtrakutas, who acted as this crucial bridge between North and South India. Three incredibly powerful empires, all on a collision course. And what were they all fighting for? One city, Kannauj. But why? Why all this fuss over one city? Because Kannauj wasn't just a city, it was Harsha's old capital, the symbolic heart of imperial power. If you controlled Kannauj, you controlled the incredibly rich Gangetic plains. And even more than that, it meant you could claim the title of Chakravartin, the universal ruler, the king of kings. For over 100 years, these three empires poured their blood and treasure into capturing and losing Kannauj in a relentless, brutal cycle of war.
But listen, it would be a huge mistake to think these three were the only players on the board. The Indian subcontinent was this incredible mosaic of powerful kingdoms. And while the tripartite struggle was raging, other dynasties were busy forging their own legacies, building magnificent cities, and getting ready to make their own bid for glory.
Deep in the heart of India, in a region called Bundelkhand, the Chandelas rose to power. They started out as powerful vassals, basically sworn to the Pratiharas, but pretty soon they became a major power in their own right. And their legacy? Oh, it's written in stone, in the breathtaking, intricate, and world-famous temples of Khajuraho, renowned for their stunning sculptures that depict, well, every aspect of life.
A little further west, in Malwa, we find the Paramaras and their greatest ruler, Raja Bhoja. Now this guy is a fascinating figure. He was a brilliant military strategist, no doubt, but he was also a complete polymath. I mean, he personally wrote books on everything, from civil engineering and architecture to astronomy and Sanskrit grammar. He was the literal definition of a philosopher king.
And over in Rajasthan, the Chauhans, also known as the Chahamanas, were building up their power base. Their rule would eventually culminate in one of the most famous names in all of Indian history, Prithviraj Chauhan III. And as we're about to see, it was his destiny to stand at the very turning point of this era, confronting a new and very formidable challenge from beyond the frontier.
Okay, now let's completely shift our focus and turn our attention south. Because while the North was locked in this brutal struggle for land, a completely different kind of empire was reaching its peak. This wasn't a power obsessed with a single city. This was a thalassocracy, a maritime empire built on the waves. What that means is their power didn't come from conquering land. It came from controlling the seas, dominating trade routes, and projecting power with a truly scary navy. This was the age of the great imperial Cholas.
I mean, the Chola rise to power was nothing short of spectacular. It all starts with Rajaraja I, who builds this powerful navy and goes on to conquer Sri Lanka and the Maldives. But then his son, the incredible Rajendra I, takes it to a whole other level. He doesn't just raid. He launches a full-scale naval invasion across the Bay of Bengal, attacking the powerful Srivijaya kingdom over in Southeast Asia, the kingdom that controlled the vital trade routes to China. This was an assertion of power on an international scale that was just unprecedented in Indian history.
But the Chola power wasn't just about military might. A single year from their reign tells a very different, and maybe even more remarkable story.
So, in the year 919 AD, a series of incredibly detailed inscriptions were carved in stone in the village of Uttara Merur. And what they lay out is the constitution of the local village assembly, the Sabha. They describe exactly how members for different committees, like the Garden Committee or the Irrigation Tank Committee, were to be chosen. And how is that? By a pretty sophisticated lottery system, a public drawing of lots to make sure it was all fair. This gives us an amazing snapshot of a highly organized and surprisingly democratic administration at the grassroots level.
And this just shows you how structured their empire was. It was a well-oiled machine. You had the empire divided into provinces, or mandalams, which were then subdivided all the way down to the local village assemblies, the and the Sabha. This hierarchical but still decentralized system was really the engine that powered their vast and incredibly wealthy state.
So you have this period of intense political competition, right? But what's so incredible is that this very competition fueled an absolute explosion of culture. See, patronage was a form of power. Kings were competing not just on the battlefield, but in a race to see who could build the grandest temples, support the most brilliant scholars, and foster the most amazing new art forms.
Just take the great universities like Nalanda, which was patronized by the Pala kings. This wasn't some open campus you could just wander into. To even get in, you had to face the university's top scholars at the main gate and win a formal debate. Only the absolute sharpest minds could pass that intellectual filter. It speaks volumes about the rigorous academic standards of the age.
And hey, here's a fact that might just surprise you. In the Rashtrakuta Empire, royal women were not just confined to the palace. We have actual records of queens and princesses issuing their own grants, supervising the construction of massive temples, and acting as major financial patrons. This shows a level of public authority and influence for women that is truly remarkable for this period.
And of course, the architecture. This period gives us some of the most iconic structures in all of India. From the Palas, you get the vast Vikramashila monastery. From the Pratiharas, the towering Tilika Mandir. The Rashtrakutas literally carved an entire mountain into the breathtaking Kailash temple. The Chandelas gave us the intricate temples of Khajuraho, and the Cholas the awe-inspiring Brihadeshwara temple in Tanjavur. Each dynasty left its own unique, indelible mark on the landscape.
But this era of competing regional powers, for all its cultural brilliance, it couldn't last forever. Centuries of internal warfare had exhausted many of these great kingdoms, and now a new force with a completely different way of war and a different vision of empire was arriving from the northwest.
This whole story builds to a really dramatic climax. The turning point comes down to two battles fought just 1 year apart. In 1191, at the First Battle of Tarain, Prithviraj Chauhan soundly defeats the invading army of Muhammad Ghori. But the Rajputs kind of see it as just another routine frontier fight, no big deal. Ghori, however, returns the very next year. At the Second Battle of Tarain in 1192, he uses a new tactic, a feigned retreat, to lure the Rajputs into a trap, and he absolutely crushes Prithviraj's army. This wasn't just another battle. It was the battle that opened the door for the establishment of the Delhi Sultanate.
And that leaves us with one final vital question to think about. How did this vibrant, powerful, and culturally rich age of competing regional kingdoms, the Palas, the Cholas, the Chauhans,
end up creating the very conditions that allowed a new, external power to come in and establish a unified empire of its own. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the greatest threat doesn't come from without, but from within.